On my birthday, instead of waiting for my husband and son to come home, I received a video that shattered everything I believed about my family. Before I tell you what was in that video, let me ask you something. Where are you listening from right now? Your phone, your TV, or headphones you shouldn't be wearing at work? Because when I press play, I realized something terrifying. Some moments don't just hurt. They rearrange your entire life. I had spent the whole afternoon preparing. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and melted sugar. The cake sat in the center of the table, candles already placed but unlit, waiting for the right moment. I kept glancing at the clock, telling myself not to be dramatic. They'd be late. They were always late. But they'd show up smiling, apologizing, pretending they hadn't forgotten. I wanted to believe that. I needed to believe it. That's when my phone buzzed. Not a call. Not a message from my husband saying they were on the way. Just a notification. A video file. No explanation. No caption. Just a name I didn't recognize at first. I hesitated for a second. Something about the timing felt wrong. Then I told myself I was being paranoid. I pressed play anyway. The screen filled with noise. A restaurant. Laughter. Music in the background. And then I saw them. My husband was sitting at a long table, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months. Across from him sat a woman I didn't know. She leaned in as if she belonged there. But it wasn't her that made my stomach drop. It was my son. He was beside her. Too close. His shoulder pressed into her arm. He looked comfortable. Familiar. Like this wasn't new. Like this wasn't strange. Like this was normal. I leaned closer to the screen without realizing it. Someone behind the camera laughed and said something I couldn't hear clearly. Then my son smiled, wide and genuine, and said the words that still echo in my head. I wish you were my mom. The room around me disappeared. I didn't hear the rest of the video. I couldn't. My ears rang so loudly it felt like standing too close to a siren. My hands went numb. The phone slipped slightly in my grip, but I didn't drop it. I stared at my son's face, frozen in that moment of happiness I wasn't part of. The video ended. The kitchen was silent again. The cake was still there. The candles were still unlit. The clock kept ticking as if nothing had happened. Then I noticed the sender. It wasn't my husband. It wasn't my son. It was the woman in the video. That detail mattered more than I understood at the time. I stared at her name on the screen, my mind racing ahead even as my body stayed frozen. Why would she send this to me? Was it cruelty? A mistake? Or something worse? A message appeared underneath the video, almost as an afterthought. Sorry, wrong chat. That's when I knew. This wasn't meant to hurt me. It was never supposed to reach me at all. And somehow, that made it unbearable. I sat down slowly at the table, my knees weak. The chair scraped softly against the floor. I remember noticing the smallest details. The way the frosting had started to sag, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the smell of sugar that now felt nauseating. I didn't cry. That frightened me. Instead, my mind began connecting dots I'd ignored for too long. The late evenings. The sessions. The way my son had started closing his bedroom door. The way my husband would say, "She understands him better," as if that was something to be proud of. I picked up my phone again and opened her profile. Her smile was everywhere. Soft colors, gentle lighting, quotes about emotional safety and rebuilding trust. She was a child psychologist. That much was clear immediately. Her work revolved around families, parents, children, and my son. I scrolled until my thumb ached. Photos of workshops, group sessions, smiling teenagers, encouraging captions about healing broken connections. Then I saw a picture from weeks ago. The same restaurant, the same table. My son was in the background, laughing. This hadn't started tonight. I leaned back and closed my eyes. I felt something settle inside me, not anger, not sadness. A decision forming quietly, solid and irreversible. I knew what most people would do next. Call their husband, scream, demand answers, fight for explanations, for apologies, for reassurance. I didn't do any of that. I stood up, walked into the bedroom, and pulled a suitcase from the closet. As I folded clothes, my phone buzzed again. A message from my husband. Running late. Don't wait up. I stared at the words for a long time. Then I placed the phone face down on the bed. Every movement felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. Shirts folded neatly, shoes placed side by side, documents slipped into an inner pocket. I wasn't rushing. I wasn't shaking. I moved like someone who already knew how this ended. Before I zipped the suitcase, I paused. I thought about leaving a note. A long one. Pages of explanations. Questions. Pain. Instead, I took out a single sheet of paper. I wrote one sentence. I will not compete for my place in my own family. I left it on the table beside the cake. The candles were still unlit. I turned off the lights and closed the door behind me. As I stepped into the night, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't my husband. It was my son. And before I could decide whether to answer, I realized something that made my chest tighten. Whatever he was about to say would change what happened next. The phone kept vibrating in my hand. My son's name glowed on the screen, lighting up the dark street in front of me. I stood there for a long moment, the suitcase heavy beside my leg, listening to the muffled sounds of the city at night. Cars passing, someone laughing somewhere far away. Life continuing as if mine hadn't just fractured. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't care. Because I cared too much to lie. The phone stopped ringing. A message appeared instead. Mom, where are you? I read it once. Then again. Then I locked the screen and slid the phone into my bag without replying. If I spoke now, I would soften. And softness was how I had been replaced without noticing. I walked to my car and drove. I didn't have a dramatic destination in mind. No friend's couch. No tearful reunion. I drove until the city lights blurred into something distant and unfamiliar, until the tightness in my chest loosened just enough to breathe. At a red light, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my husband. I didn't check the message. I didn't need to. I already knew the pattern. Confusion first. Then irritation. Then blame. Then panic. I had lived inside that cycle for years. I turned the phone off completely. The next morning, I woke up in a small hotel room that smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet. For a moment, I didn't remember where I was. Then the memory hit, not like a wave, but like cold water poured slowly down my spine. The video. The words. I wish you were my mom. I sat up in bed and waited for the pain. It came, but not the way I expected. It wasn't sharp. It was dull. Heavy. The kind of pain that presses down instead of cutting through. And beneath it, something else had begun to form. Distance. I showered, dressed, and made a call that would quietly reshape my future. But before I tell you what that call was, ask yourself this. If disappearing meant protecting what was left of your dignity, would you do it? I called the hospital network I had once worked with overseas. A position had been discussed months earlier, casually, the way people talk about possibilities they never expect to need. The offer was still open. We can have you here within the week, they said. I looked out the window at a parking lot just beginning to fill. Yes, I replied. That works. After that, everything moved quickly. Lawyers don't ask emotional questions when paperwork is clear. I filed for divorce remotely. No accusations. No demands. Just signatures and dates. I left instructions for communication to go through representation only. I didn't read my husband's messages. I didn't listen to his voicemails. But I knew they were escalating because my lawyer told me. He says he doesn't understand, she said carefully. That's not new, I replied. My son tried again. This time he left a voice note. Mom, Dad's really mad. He says you're being dramatic. Can you please come home so we can talk? I closed my eyes as I listened. Not because of what he said, but because of what he didn't. He never asked why I left. That realization stayed with me as I boarded the plane days later, my suitcase now joined by two others, my life compressed into manageable pieces. As the aircraft lifted off, the city fell away beneath me, and with it, the version of myself who waited for permission to matter. For a while, there was silence. Then the consequences began. My husband called my workplace. He demanded explanations. He demanded reassurance. He demanded I return and act like an adult. When that failed, he blamed the psychologist. When that failed, he blamed stress. When that failed, he blamed me. The psychologist disappeared quietly from their lives. No farewell. No explanation. Her involvement had only existed as long as it was easy. When the structure collapsed, She stepped away without looking back. Replacement only works when someone else is doing the work. My son struggled. School called. Teachers noted changes. Withdrawal. Anger. Confusion. He asked questions no one around him could answer honestly. And for the first time, the absence I'd left behind stopped feeling like a gap and started feeling like a mirror. Years passed. Life in a new place is quieter. It doesn't announce itself. It grows slowly around you. New routines. New colleagues. Mornings filled with purpose instead of tension. I didn't erase my past, but I stopped living inside it. I didn't reach out. Neither did my husband, eventually. But one afternoon, years later, as I walked through a hospital corridor with a folder under my arm, someone said my name. Not loudly, not confidently, like they weren't sure I'd turn around. I stopped. I knew that voice. I turned slowly, already sensing what I would see, but unprepared for how it would feel. My son stood a few steps behind me, older, taller, familiar and unfamiliar all at once. His face carried something new now. Not anger. Uncertainty. "Mom," he said again. My heart slammed once. Hard. Before I could answer, footsteps echoed behind him. Another presence entered the space. And when I looked up, I saw my ex-husband standing there too. Older. Thinner. His confidence frayed at the edges. The past had found me. And suddenly, the silence I'd built my life around was about to be broken. I hadn't imagined this moment, not even once. In my mind, if we ever met again, it would be controlled. Prepared. I would be ready. But standing in that hospital corridor, with fluorescent lights humming softly overhead and the faint smell of disinfectant in the air, I realized how naive that thought had been. My son stood there, his backpack slung over one shoulder, hands clenched at his sides, as if he didn't know what to do with them. He was taller than I remembered. His voice was deeper. But his eyes, those were the same. Searching. Guarded. Afraid of the answer. My ex-husband lingered a few steps behind him, like he wasn't sure whether he had the right to stand closer. That alone told me how much had changed. For a second, none of us spoke. People passed us in the hallway. Nurses. Patients. Conversations and footsteps flowed around us, oblivious to the fact that 3 lives had just collided again after years of silence. "Do you work here?" my son finally asked. It wasn't the question I expected. Not "why did you leave?" or "how could you disappear?" Just that. "Yes," I replied. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I do." He nodded, absorbing that information like it mattered more than it should. Like it filled in a blank he'd been carrying around for years. My ex-husband cleared his throat. "You didn't tell me you were here," he said, trying to sound composed. "You didn't ask," I replied, without looking at him. That small exchange cracked something open. My son shifted his weight, glancing between us. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. "Just for a minute." I hesitated, not because I didn't want to hear him, but because I knew once we started, we couldn't stop halfway. And I wasn't sure he was ready for the whole truth. Before I could answer, my ex-husband stepped forward. "I think that's a good idea," he said quickly. "We should all talk." I finally looked at him then. "No," I said calmly. "Not all of us." His face tightened. "I deserve." "This isn't about what you deserve," I interrupted, my voice low but firm. "It's about what he needs." I nodded toward our son. There was a long pause. One of those moments where the next few seconds decide everything. My ex-husband stepped back. "I'll wait," he said. The words sounded foreign in his mouth. I turned to my son. "There's a cafe downstairs," I said. "If you want." He nodded immediately, relief flickering across his face. We walked side by side in silence. The elevator ride felt longer than it was. I could feel the questions pressing against him, crowding his chest, waiting for permission to come out. At a small table near the window, we sat across from each other. He ordered a drink he didn't touch. I noticed his hands were shaking slightly. "I didn't know where you went," he said suddenly. "Dad wouldn't tell me." "I didn't want you pulled into the middle," I replied. He swallowed. "I already was." That landed harder than any accusation. He looked down at the table. "She told me you didn't care. That you were selfish. That you left because you wanted a different life." The psychologist. I didn't react outwardly, but inside, Something tightened. I left, I said carefully, because I wasn't allowed to be your mother anymore. He looked up sharply. What does that mean? I took a breath. It means decisions were being made about you without me. About our family. About who mattered. And when I saw that video, I realized I was already gone, even before I packed a bag. His jaw clenched. I was just a kid. I know, I said softly. That's why I didn't fight you. I removed myself from something that was hurting both of us. Tears welled in his eyes. He blinked hard, like he was angry at them. I thought you abandoned me. The words cut deep, but they didn't surprise me. I left a situation, I said. Not you. There's a difference. He pressed his lips together, nodding slowly, as if replaying years of memories through this new lens. I kept waiting for you to come back, he admitted. And then I started telling myself you never would. I reached across the table, but stopped short of touching his hand. I would have come back, I said, if you'd ever called. He flinched. I didn't know how, he whispered. Silence stretched between us again, but it was different now. Not empty. Heavy with things finally being said. That's when my ex-husband appeared in the doorway. He'd been watching us through the glass. I think we should talk too, he said. I straightened slightly. Fine, I said, but understand something first. He waited. This conversation doesn't decide anything. We stepped back into the corridor. My son stood a little behind me now. Not hiding, but choosing his position. I never meant for it to go that far, my ex-husband said quickly. She was helping. Things were hard. You were distant. I raised my hand. Stop, I said. You don't get to rewrite the past to make it more comfortable. He looked at our son. I was trying to protect him. You replaced me, I replied. And then you told him it was my fault. His mouth opened. Closed. I was angry, he admitted. You left without explanation. I left a sentence, I said. You just didn't like what it said. He looked down. I didn't think you'd stay gone, he muttered. That was it. That was the truth beneath everything. He thought my absence was temporary. A protest. A bluff. My son stepped forward then. She didn't leave us, he said quietly. She left what you turned us into. My ex-husband looked at him, stunned. And in that moment, I knew something irreversible had happened. The balance had shifted, but what I didn't know, what I couldn't yet see, was how far that shift would go. Because later that evening, as I walked back to my apartment alone, my phone buzzed with a message I hadn't expected. It was from my ex-husband, and it said, "We need to talk about custody." The message sat on my screen longer than it should have. "We need to talk about custody." I read it twice, not because I didn't understand the words, but because of what they revealed. After everything, after years of silence, after watching his certainty crumble, he still believed there was something left to negotiate. I didn't reply. Not that night. I set the phone down and walked to the window instead. The city outside was calm, lights blinking on one by one as evening settled in. Somewhere below, a couple laughed. A bus hissed to a stop. Life continued, indifferent to old wounds reopening. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in a long while. The next morning, I went to work as usual. Rounds. Consults. Conversations that required focus and precision. Patients don't wait for your personal history to catch up with you. And in that routine, something important became clear. I wasn't running anymore. By midday, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't him. It was my son. "Can we talk again?" he wrote. "Just us." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Then I typed back one word. "Yes." We met that evening at a small park near my apartment. It was quiet, almost empty, the kind of place people pass through without lingering. He sat on a bench, shoulders hunched, staring at the ground until he noticed me. "I thought about what you said," he began immediately. "About leaving the situation." "Not me." I nodded, letting him set the pace. "I asked Dad questions," he continued. "About her. About what really happened." He didn't answer. "Not really." That didn't surprise me. "He said you made things difficult," my son added. "That you were cold. That you walked away." "And what do you think?" I asked gently. He hesitated. "I think it was easier to believe that than admit I helped push you out." The honesty in his voice made my chest ache. "I was angry," he went on. But mostly I was confused. She told me things. About how you didn't understand me. About how she did. I closed my eyes briefly. When I opened them, I said only one thing. She never had to live with the consequences. He nodded slowly. I know that now. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that feels earned instead of awkward. Then he asked the question I'd been bracing for since the hospital. Can I stay with you for a while? There it was. Not custody. Not courts. Not ultimatums. A choice. I didn't answer immediately. Not to punish him, but to honor the weight of what he was asking. You don't have to decide everything right now, I said carefully. You're allowed to take time. He looked up at me, eyes steady. I already have. That night, my ex-husband showed up at my door unannounced. I didn't open it at first. I stood on the other side, listening to his breathing through the wood, to the familiar impatience restrained by uncertainty. Please, he said quietly. We need to talk. I opened the door. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but emotionally. The confidence that once filled every room he entered had worn thin. Our son told me what he wants, he said without preamble. And? I asked. And I don't agree, he replied, jaw tightening. You left. You don't get to just come back and... I raised my hand. I didn't come back, I said calmly. He found me. He fell silent. This isn't about winning, I continued. Or losing. Or punishing you. It's about who he feels safe with now. And what about me? He asked. I'm still his father. Yes, I said. And you always will be. The simplicity of that answer seemed to disarm him. He's choosing you, he said, voice low. After everything. He's choosing honesty, I corrected. That just happens to include me. He looked away, swallowing hard. I never thought you'd stay gone, he admitted. I thought you'd cool off. Come back. Apologize. I didn't leave to be chased, I said. I left to be free. There was nothing else to say after that. He nodded once. Slowly. Defeated not by anger, but by understanding too late. I won't fight this, he said finally. I won't put him through that. That was the closest thing to accountability I would ever receive. After he left, my son stepped out from the hallway. You didn't have to do that, he said. I know, I replied. But I wanted to. Weeks passed. Paperwork was signed. Arrangements were made. Not battles, agreements. My son moved in quietly, cautiously, like someone entering unfamiliar territory. We learned each other again in small ways. Shared meals, late-night conversations, comfortable silence, no grand declarations, no instant healing, just presence. One evening, as we washed dishes side by side, he said, I used to think mothers were replaceable. I didn't respond. Now I know, he continued, some absences teach you what you should never take for granted again. I turned off the tap and looked at him. That lesson cost all of us something, I said. What matters is what we do with it now. He smiled then. Small. Real. Later that night, I stood on the balcony, the city stretched out before me, steady and unremarkable in the best way. If you're still listening, ask yourself this. How many times have you stayed silent to keep the peace, only to lose yourself in the process? Because here's what I learned. Walking away isn't weakness. Silence isn't surrender. And love doesn't ask you to disappear to prove it exists. I didn't win by taking something from them. I won by refusing to keep losing myself. And that was the ending they never expected, but the one I deserved.